US politics next after the Obamas gave their endorsement to Kamala Harris to replace President Joe Biden and run against Donald Trump. The race for the White House is now looking much tougher to call. Mr. Trump has wasted no time in going on the attack against his opponent during his rally at West Palm Beach.
She was a bum 3 weeks ago. She was a bum. A failed vice president in a failed administration with millions of people crossing, and she was the border czar. Now they're trying to say she never was the border czar. She had nothing to do with the border. She was the border czar. They're trying to take it. They're deleting it all over the place. They want to take it because we have the worst border in history. And 3.5 years ago, we had the best border that we've ever had.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, has defended resurfaced comments he made in which he called Democratic politicians a bunch of childless cat ladies with miserable lives. His remarks made in 2021 have been criticised this week, with Hollywood actress Jennifer Aniston among those who have hit out. Here's what J.D. Vance told media personality Megyn Kelly.
I know the media wants to attack me and wants me to back down on this, Megyn, but the simple point that I made is that having children, becoming a father, becoming a mother, I really do think it changes your perspective in a pretty profound way. This is something, of course, we've recognized for hundreds of years in this country, that human civilization has always recognized. But there's a deeper point here, Megyn. It's not a criticism of people who don't have children. I explicitly said in my remarks, despite the fact the media has lied about this, that this is not about criticizing people who, for various reasons, didn't have kids. This is about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family and anti-child.
Matthew Bartlett once served Trump in the State Department, is a Republican strategist. Pollster Scarlett McGuire is with us this evening, as is the political strategist Rina Shah. Matthew, Scarlett, Rina, good evening. Good evening. Okay, Scarlett, let's start with you. How are the polls looking?
So I think the first big caveat is that I think it's actually too early, to make a judgment on the polls. There does seem to have been some rallying behind Kamala Harris, and I think that's particularly evident in, for example, the donations that have been flooding in. But with polls, I know it's a boring answer, but I would give it another week or so to go. But I think one thing you can say is that it has injected uncertainty into the race. Now, I would have said the race was already actually not as sewn up as some people thought it was, just because in America we're talking about such fine margins. Less than 200,000 votes across only 7 states decided the result of the last election. But that being said, I think it's given Democrats the potential to have more of a chance. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, but is that potential in their head, or is there any polling data to suggest that it's fact?
That there is polling data to suggest that we're seeing an improvement in Harris versus Trump than Biden versus Trump. Again, I would caution and say it's too early. There is polling data that shows nationally that to be the case. But what really matters in America are the crucial states that will decide the next election. And there's also been polling that shows Kamala Harris getting closer to Donald Trump, or even overtaking him in a couple of those crucial states as well. But again, I'm going to be boring and just caveat and saying it's early days yet.
And when is the optimum time for a poll to be giving us a direction? As close to the election as possible, I'm guessing.
Well, exactly. So polls do tend to get much more accurate the closer that you get to election day. In America, we tend to think of things kicking into gear after Labor Day. So sort of first week of September, the race starts really coming into focus. I think that's changed slightly, though, just because we know how about 45% of the population will definitely vote Republican, and then about the same will definitely vote Democrat. So you're already looking at quite a lot of votes being sewn up. It's about what's happening in the middle. I would say that you'd be wanting to look at polling to see what this was really looking like with fieldwork dates that were sort of 2 weeks out of the date that Biden resigned and then going forward. I think one thing we can say, though, is that even though Kamala Harris's ratings are underwater, they are better than Joe Biden's, and crucially, she is less well known there's a less concrete image of her, which I think in this case actually helps her. So about 1 in 5 Americans don't have a sort of fully formed opinion of her yet, or so they tell pollsters. And I think, again, that points to upside for the Democrats.
Matthew Bartlett, in that clip we played of Donald Trump at that rally, it's clear that they're trying to pin her. He's trying to pin her on the border and failures at the border. I just wonder how his performance building that wall that still isn't built will go down if it's properly scrutinised.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. The president certainly has a way with words and has put American politics into the vernacular. There's probably no one who does not believe that he has been one of the earliest and loudest advocates around immigration, even specifically on the wall, and that if he had his choice, he would, continue on with that. Whereas, Vice President Harris was in charge of the border, put in charge by President Biden, and probably failed at that.
But Matthew, he needs to continue on with it because he didn't build it all as he promised. He didn't even build a lot of the wall, did he, at the end of the day?
It's unclear how you measure it, how you want to respect it. But in terms of intent, the notion is, he did not, let's say he did not live up to his promise. Well, it certainly wasn't because, it was because he tried to dupe people or he went back on his word, rather. Yes, there were obstacles, and you almost think that Democrats may be wise to kind of own some of that issue.
Rina? Good evening, Rina.
Good evening.
Do you think Donald Trump is more fearful of his new opponent?
I think maybe slightly so. Not entirely, because that's just who Donald Trump is. He doesn't fear the enemy so much as he fears the unknown. And so maybe that's playing into it a little bit more. That Kamala Harris does present a little bit of an unknown. Do we fully know where she's at? No, we don't. It's been a week, and she's had a far better reception than most people would have thought. It's been marked with grassroots support and, of course, all of the Democratic establishment of support. And that does sort of shock the consciousness. So in that sense, I do think Trump is fearful a bit more than what would be expected. But really, it comes down to, how does this next week go? Does this honeymoon remain? How does her polling play out in the Sun Belt? Of course, we're talking about Arizona, Nevada, Georgia. Those are places where Donald Trump has fared well in the polls, of course, has been stronger than Joe Biden was. But of course, there's that blue wall as well. When we talk about the Rust Belt, I think the pick of J.D. Vance was entirely aimed at trying to just get to what Trump would and Trump world considers the average American. But so far, I've seen a pretty lukewarm reception. There has been, of course, a great deal of support coming from the MAGA base, but that's not the entirety of our electorate. So I don't know that the Vance pick was the smartest one for him. And I think that's what's foremost on the former president's mind, more so than Kamala Harris this week.
I wonder, Matthew, if Donald Trump would have still chosen J.D. Vance as his vice president had he known Biden was stepping down.
Boy, you wish I'm sure he wishes he had a time machine because I have a feeling it would be a different pick. Largely agree. Yes, this is someone who J.D. Vance, new to the political scene, kind of a flip-flop from his original intent, spoke to the MAGA crowd and maybe crawled out of a MAGA cave. And America is saying, what are you talking about? Here's the upside. Typically, historically, vice presidential picks do not end up mattering, being consequential in terms of who people are voting for. They end up voting for the top of the ticket. I think this will be either a Donald Trump or a Kamala Harris, who is in much more control of their fate, rather than J.D. Vance, the vice presidential pick, who tends to be they tend to be lost in the undercard.
How do you think the childless cat ladies with miserable lives line, do you think it's coming back to bite J.D. Vance in any substantive way, Matthew?
Unclear. I think those that were, for President Trump and supporting him and previously may have a different take. But I don't think he's certainly winning over any new votes with it. It may be the most inarticulate way of saying, listen, I am running, because I care about the American family at the kitchen table, at the pressures that they feel with kids going to school, electricity, energy, affordability, education. So again, this is someone who is new to politics, coming from a different ethos maybe, and certainly presents in a very different way.
Rina, would it be better for Kamala Harris if Joe Biden stayed at home? Does she need him to stay on the sidelines? Is he any help? campaigning for her?
It just ties her back to his record, and his record is so far not terrible. I mean, look, the Republicans are going to criticize Bidenomics all day long. All these buzzwords for, economic policies, it's all fine and well, but Donald Trump is going to have to implement some of that same economic policy and aimed at reducing inflation. I mean, when we look at the truth here, we all are in a post-pandemic world, and the same kinds of policies that Biden's had to promulgate, I can't imagine that Trump won't have to do some of the same if he re-enters the White House. But the reality is Trump is 78. He's not far behind Biden. He could croak at any moment, and JD Vance then becomes president. How much do you trust this person from, this hillbilly background, which is fine. I come from Appalachia too, but he doesn't speak to me when he talks about dividing Americans. This childless cat lady's comment, it was so not just inarticulate, it was flat stupid. As a political strategist, I think to myself, pull that guy off the trail. He's doubling down on this now. Not only does that sound like he doesn't give a darn about women in cities or in urban areas who, for various reasons, given that we're more educated than our male counterparts as American women, I must add, we tend to hold more professional degrees. And we now have the power of the purse. Not only was that aimed at really insulting them, it was also it was unfortunate because abortion is on the ballot. Reproductive rights and access have been completely taken over by the Democrats. I mean, Kamala Harris is coming out, getting all this grassroots support from American women coast to coast. And a lot of independent and center-right women are also turning their head and looking at her and saying, this is somebody that would actually give me the freedom to do what I need to do with my body. Bodily autonomy is central to this election. And JD Vance is showing what a horrid pick he is when he's just choosing to talk about family, family, family. It's a show me, don't tell me type of moment. And I think Trump could have had a better pick.
Matthew?
Some of that might be true. While we never wish a president to croak, we've certainly had heated rhetoric.
Nobody's wishing for it. Nobody's
Understood.
wishing for it, but it's reality. He's much older, just like Joe Biden, 3 years junior.
And I'm happy to hear you say that that's not the case. But, there are underlying powerful issues in this race, and some of which is freedom of choice around abortion. And some of them are pressures are domestically around inflation, again, affordability, two raging wars, a feeling that the country is not on the right track. So these will all be balanced. I don't think that the vice presidential picks again, ultimately change a state, much less an election. But we're going to find out, right? Everything is new here.
We certainly are. We're going to find out, and it's going to be exciting right up to when we do find out. Matthew and Rina, thank you very much. 5 to midnight. Have you ever fancied cutting contact with the world?